Welcome, dudes.
Dude.
Welcome to the Dude Nation and our very first masterclass, Grief for Dudes 101. Welcome. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're from, and whatever had you come here. Thank you. All of you is welcome here. Whatever you're carrying, it's all good. It's all good here, man. It's all good. We welcome all of you. Hey, Ben.
Hey, I'm so glad each one of you are here. Welcome, dudes. Welcome, Adam.
Sorry, it didn't take me long to start crying. Right?
Hey, that's perfect. That's perfect. You beat me to it.
I know.
So thank God. Mazel tov.
Thank
We're
you.
here together.
We're going to be about 90 minutes. We're going to be talking about some experiences that Ben and I have had individually and collectively as part of the Dude Nation and this organization and community that we're building. We're going to talk about some background. We're also going to talk about some things that are coming up. But most importantly, we wanted to just throw it on the table and say that my suspicion is that most of us as men are walking around with some type of unprocessed grief and sorrow. And expectations of our communities and our family and friends is probably, mourning is not necessarily welcome in the United States. It's like, come on, let's get it going. Get over it. Let's go. And I'm sure you guys will agree, and you can throw your hands up in the chat if you like. Sometimes it's just not that easy. And so we put on a brave face and we keep walking around, and that pain is still there. Ben, before we get into the meat of the matter, I wanted to ask you one particular question. How are you, really? So for those of you who don't know, I spent the last 34 years as a chef. This organization, chowco.org, created this little chart, their peer-to-peer support for people in the hospitality industry. They do a lot of Zoom calls once every week. And one of the questions they ask are, how are you, comma, really? Because we don't want the pat answer. We want to know how you are, really. And I encourage you to put it in the chat. And so what they've done is they like rare, medium, well, and well. And as you can see, like even in medium, there's glad, amused, patient, concerned, grumpy, or present. So, sometimes those emotions are kind of conflicting. And instead of making them polar opposites, we want to bring them all together and say, it's okay. So Ben, how would you say you are today?
Wow. I'm taking this in. This is great. I see myself in a few different columns here. If I was to choose one, I would say I'm between like rare and medium.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm in both of those places simultaneously, and medium rare, actually, looking at that. Like, there's parts of me that I'm sure a little irritated or frustrated from life. My nervous system is slightly more activated than I would like it to be. And there's simultaneously a lot, like grief and joy are present. As I said, when I came in here, that I wanted our fathers to be part of this too. And that grief is a birthright. It's a rite of passage. So that's kind of how I am, and I think looking at different emotions, the fact that you can capture this in different ways is a really beautiful thing too.
Yeah. I would say right now.
Wait, Adam.
Oh, go ahead.
How are you?
Comma. Really? Why, thank you for asking. I would say I'm between medium rare and medium. There's a lot of energy in my body as we were getting ready for this. It's a big topic. Some folks don't like to talk about it. So I, again, wanted to say to everybody who's watching, congratulations and thanks for showing up, for you, for your family, and for each other. So I would say, medium rare, and for Wayne, Lenny, Jason, if you guys got an opportunity, throw your temperature in the chat, because we'd like to take the temperature of the room, because that actually helps us inform the conversation moving forward. So thank you.
I'd like to jump in with that, Adam.
Yes, please.
This is while we're live and we are recording this. This is also an opportunity to interact. So whether you're listening to this now or in the future, share how you're actually doing. This is an opportunity, not just, we're not on TV here, right? This is for you. So I really encourage you to engage wherever you can and answer the questions. And if you're live right now, type them in the chat. And if you're not, write them down. So how are you really?
Yeah. Lenny's chiming in. He's crispy. He's well done. Yeah, totally get it. And so let's start off with a question, shall we? I'd like to know, and throw it in the chat, what drew you to this particular event? Why did you think it would be a good idea to show up in this space to talk about grief? And I can tell you a little bit about me. I've been, in the hospitality business for about 40 years. My dad died when I was 30 years old, way before he should have. He was 60, and I spent again another half my life, mourning the fact that he's not here. And while there's kind of a sweetness to that and nostalgia, I also recognize that part of me was also kind of holding on to this weird sense of loyalty to him because he wasn't around to defend himself, whether my mom was, cracking on him or whatever. And it's taken me a while to heal that breach. And so I'm still left with that kind of sweet, that sweet love for him. And I also recognize that he was a human being and flawed in his own ways. So I can look at it clearly now, whereas perhaps I didn't before. And, being part of this group with Ben has had me look at a lot of the ways that I process grief or don't, and how that separates me from other people. And if there's anything that I'm left with right here, right now, is I want to own all of me so that I can show up fully as me. Ben, how about you?
Well, I show up for that, getting to hear other men's stories, other dudes share, be real, like just to create an opportunity for other men to share. And before I answer that, we have a man that's already shared, and I want to read this out loud for us here. My mom died at the end of January. This is from Lenny F. My good friend Frank died in February. My brother-in-law's mother died in March. I got a break until August. My friend John died. And then one of my closest friends in the whole world, Steve, died. I spent 2 to 3 hours a day on the phone with hysterical widows.
Yeah.
So I want to honor you, whatever it took for you to be here. And it's not uncommon that we take on all of this inside of all of that loss for other people. And so thank you for being here for yourself, Lenny, and on behalf of everyone in your life. And also, I don't want to diminish, it's quite a bit of death of people close to you.
Yeah.
And if we're not making space for grief, what are we doing? So that's part of why I'm here, is both as a leader and a student. I have lost many people close to me in many different ages, but it wasn't until my father died. And you mentioned your father. My father, Reverend Dr. James D. Curtis. He loved to be called Jim or Dr. Curtis. He led with his heart. And I was just on the phone with a Jewish friend before this. And even though I grew up in a church, my father encouraged me to be also in a synagogue and also learning about the Muslim faith and all different kinds of faiths and understanding, and including those who don't, and just to learn and listen from each other. But really it was and he led with love, and that's something I saw was really exceptional in the work that he was in. But when he passed away, I'd started my first men's group, and thank God, my first dude circle, what became known as Dude School. And it was in that space that, all the men, it was the only thing I could show up for. I really crumbled after that. And yet I was coaching and I had clients and calls, but the only thing I could show up for was this men's group. I could tell that there was power and source there. And these guys said, no, 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 tonight we got you. And they just held space for me. And I started working with a grief counselor and a grief coach and stayed in these men's groups. And grief began to move so much so, and on a daily basis. Now it's part of my daily morning practice is to make space for grief. I have an accountability buddy from dude school to make space for my grief each day. And now I've learned to really learn from it and welcome it. I've said, like, my heart went from breaking for every time someone died to breaking open to learn to love deeper and fuller every time someone in my life has died, especially my father. He loved everyone, and so it's really helped me learn to love even more and greater, and continue the work I do to make safe spaces for men and for us to even talk about death, because we don't in our culture. And I know that was something really rare that my family would bring up, and even in our society in the South, in the Southern home, it was not talked about, let alone was there space for it. And I don't see men have a lot of space to grieve, nor or know how to, or know where to start. Or I had 3 discovery calls with potential clients today, and they all said, like, well, I don't actually have time for this, I have kids.
Right.
So how do we grieve? And I find this to be one of the most important healthy conversations possible, and that's really why I'm here, is also to learn from each one of you.
I'm reminded, Ben, as you're sharing, of Martin Prechtel, who famously did a series of speeches or presentations at the Minnesota Men's Conference around grief and praise, where his point was, they're sides of the same coin. So every time you grieve, there's also praise. Every time you praise, there's also grief. And that doesn't necessarily true up to our Western vision of what grief is and how we're supposed to deal with it. Again, it's kind of like, okay, good, you got a couple minutes? Great, let's get on with it. I was struck a couple years ago because I was watching a HBO series called State of Play, and it was by a person. It was all about sports, but there was one that really kicked me, to be frank, in the nuts, which was Happy. And what they did is they went around, they talked to ex-football players, and they some of the big ones, and they asked them, like, what do you miss about the game? And it was, to a person, it wasn't the accolades, it wasn't 80,000 screaming fans, it wasn't the money or the trophies. It was their teammates that they missed. And when I was watching that, it just floored me, because as a chef, I remember building, at least 20 really high functioning teams where it's, you're in the dirt, you're sweating. It's, the cohesion that comes around that is powerful. And yet at the end of that particular time, I would, pack my bag and move on to the next place to build another team. And yet I could never figure out why I was always sad, like something was missing. And I realized watching that I have never, ever, ever grieved for the team that I left. And so that kind of got me on this path of, like, there has got to be a better way, because again, as long as I have this unprocessed grief, I can't be present to the new team or to the new family or to the new wife, because I'm still grieving the shit in the past. So it's an amazing conundrum. And again, I'm really glad that everybody's here. Zach, thank you very much. I'm seeing a lot of loss in the chat, dads, moms, friends. And as I said before at the very top of this, we welcome it all, because this is the place to bring it. So I know Ben is going to do us an activation. So I'm going to invite everybody to close their eyes for a couple minutes. I'm going to put him center solo. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to future activate the possibility of what it's like to have processed grief fully, so that we can be in our lives fully.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. And thank you, everyone, for being here. If you're here, you're part of the medicine. You're part of the solution. You have medicine on your heart that is needed in the world. So just by sharing your pain, your loss, your grief, your joy, your healing, you are part of the solution. So thank you. So as Adam has done, I invite you to close your eyes for a few minutes. And we'll only be here for a few minutes. And one of the gifts that I'd like you to invite in right now is presence. Take a deep breath. Let's take 3 deep breaths together. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I'd like you to bring your awareness to, invite you to bring your awareness to your feet. Part of the gift of grief is being present for whatever's there, that in order to heal it, we actually have to feel it. And that includes taking time and space to find some stillness, whether it be in our mind or our hearts. And one of the greatest ways to do that, to root ourselves, is to reconnect ourselves to our feet, the ground. So just notice where your feet are right now. And if they're not rooted on something, if they're not flat or touching, see if you can find a grounded space for them to touch. Just allow them to be rooted, and imagine as they are that you're like plugging in an electric socket into an outlet. By doing that, immediately all of the energy that doesn't serve you anymore releases into the earth. Like, what if just by thinking about your feet, you can release some of that energy that doesn't serve you anymore, and at the same time immediately be supported. The beautiful thing about all of this is whether you feel supported or not, you are, because if it wasn't for gravity, we'd go flying off the planet. And thanks to the earth, we are so supported. It's this incredible communication network, intelligence beneath us, holding us, breathing in and out with us. Whatever space is on your heart is there and needed and is appropriate. Your tears are important and necessary. You making space to grieve is your birthright. Grief is a rite of passage that we can learn from. If we invite it in, it actually can move so much quicker than if we try to keep it down. And grief also is like can be like a button inside of a ball inside of a box. And there's this giant ball and it's bouncing around. And every time it hits that button, you hit grief. Grief hits you. If you continue to make space for it, what happens over time is that button doesn't go away, but that ball gets smaller and it hits that button less often. And when it does, you actually start to become aware of what's going on and move through it rather than it catching you off guard. So Adam mentioned this future activation, and we're going to take this moment to actually see ourselves from the future, having already been through this 90-minute experience. And I'd like you to see yourself on the other side of this 90 minutes. So 90 minutes from now, I'd like you to envision yourself right here, right now, in the future. Sitting here, and you're sitting on the other side of this webinar. You've been through it. Notice what sensations are present and invite in how you would like to feel. How would you like to feel at the end of this 90 minutes? If it was right now, how would you like to feel in your body right now? On the other side of this. Inviting that energy in right now. And seeing yourself at the end of this time, feeling that. And what color is that feeling? With each breath, I'd like you to imagine yourself there 90 minutes from now, breathing into this color, breathing into this sensation of having finished this on the other side of it. peace, that relief, the joy, sense of accomplishment, grounding. Invite that in right now. See yourself grounded, at peace, at ease, open. And from there, we will begin. And we're going to end this meditation taking one deep breath in, hold it at the top, and on the count of 3, we'll exhale on the word dude together. 3, 2, 1. Dude.
Very nice.
It's a reminder to take ourselves a little less seriously as we make space for grief. So thank you for making space for that with us.
Just like to respond to Lenny in the chat. His shtick is guilt. Could I have done more or caused a different outcome? I'd love to stop waking at 3 a.m. thinking about it. And I hear you, brother, because I carry a lot of that, or I used to, until I recognized that who I was then did the best he could with what he knew and the tools that he had available at that time. I used to think about myself at 16 and the choices I made, and I thought that's ridiculous. 40-year-old man thinking that 16-year-old's going to have the same perspective. And so this is part of working through this grief, is also having some tenderness and kindness for yourself back then, who you were, because now you are here together, and that's the only thing that matters. And sure, shoulda, woulda, coulda, you do that game all day, but who are you? What are you sacrificing in the present to engage in that game is the question I would like to ask.
Thank you, Adam. So you guys, dudes, if you haven't shared why you're here, please do so in the chat. And thank you for those of you who have shared, so we know exactly what you're up against. And I want to tell a little bit, a short story here around the grief and death, and part of why we are here as well, how Dude Nation was born. We have a seasonal retreat in person called the Dude Deep Dive, and we held our first annual one this past summer, really. And I put up posters all over town for this, all over the Hudson Valley, in different states and different cities. And one of the first men to call me said, "My name's Tony." Well, this is the long and short of it. "My name's Tony. I'm not interested in being a participant, but I want to make sure. But I saw your poster. I think it's incredible what you're doing. And I want to make sure you're talking to me, to these dudes, about death." And he told me he was a death doula. And I just listened, and I was really moved. And as I listened, I realized he was giving me a gift. And at first thought there was already like, oh, well, thank you, Tony. Well, definitely, that's a great point. Wow. And so I did acknowledge him. And then I thought, well, we'll get back to you. I'll talk to my partner, Adam, and we'll get back to you. We already have our programming in place. And he was very sensitive and to all of that, and kind. And then we had I had this moment of, we've just been offered a gift. Someone who is a master of holding space in the conversation of death and grief, who's offered to come be of service at our retreat for our men. And so we said yes. And Anthony came, the death doula, and held a 90-minute conversation for us around a fire about death and the importance of death. And death is our final act of living, and our final act that we get to say how our death goes. And what if we got to create that right now? And how often we don't talk about death in our culture. And all the different places we don't. It took my sister going to North Carolina to be part of Western African group, which led her to read a book from a man from West Africa that was in a tribe that nurtured death And she gave me this book, and it took that, a revolutionary sister, um, to find a book about death. Or when I dated my ex-girlfriend from Maryland, her father was a Buddhist meditation teacher, so he knew Thich Nhat Hanh and happened to have the book No Death, No Fear. And even though we met in New York City as actors and models, the first book she gave me when we dated was No Death, No Fear. And I thought it was mind-blowing to read a book that about embracing death and talking about death and how much we fear death in our culture, so we don't talk about it. And then from that moment forward, also being born around Halloween and Dios de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, and watching other cultures celebrate it and us just be quiet and silently mourn in our rooms by ourselves, as a polite Southern gentleman would do. So to actually shift the language and the importance of it, and there's even become a sanitation of language. And Adam, I know you've really started to see that. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit more.
Sure.
Or
Anthony
anything.
was Anthony was awesome. I mean, when Ben told me that, we're going to have a death doula, I really didn't know what to expect. Here we got a bunch of dudes hanging around a campfire. We're just starting to get to know one another. The container is being built. Safety is now established, and we're going to bring in a guy and talk about death. I mean, I thought we were talking about living, right? Isn't that what we were doing?
Yeah.
And to be honest, it scared the shit out of me, because as a 13 or 14-year-old boy, I had a conversation with my dad, and he used to send us every Sunday with my mother to church, but he would never come. And so I asked him, yeah, Pop, like, why don't you come? And he's like, well, because I don't believe in God. I'm like, you don't believe in God? Then what do you think happens when you die? He's like, what I believe is going to happen to me when I die is that one night I'm going to go to sleep and I'm not going to wake up. And then my body will be buried in the ground, and then the worms will eat it, and I'll be part of the circle of life. Kind of like succinctly, scientifically, that's what he thought. And I kind of, nodded my head and went upstairs and immediately started freaking out that, as a 14-year-old boy, thinking one day I'm going to go to sleep and I'm never going to wake up. Like, what kind of crap is that? In what universe does it make sense that you would have an entire life of experiences and wisdom and finally get to the point where, like, maybe you're okay with yourself and that doesn't transfer over? Like, it was fundamentally a schism in me. And so I was always afraid of the conversation of death. And then when Anthony was talking to us, he, gave us some background about, we as a society have basically relegated death to the quote unquote professionals. Most people go to the hospital to die. They no longer die at home. There's no Irish wakes. Grandfather's not sitting in the dining room in a casket so everybody can come and pay homage or say goodbye. And he said, to our detriment, what's actually happening is now, because we've sanitized the language, they passed. No, they didn't pass. They died. There's all these words that we intersect, like a survivor. Well, how can you be a survivor when it was your husband that had cancer, right? So it's a way of kind of minimizing or staying away from the potency of what it's like to have someone die, and then the opportunity to grieve him in a proper way, meaning, being present to it. Like, if anybody dies at home, the hospital comes pick them up, and you don't see them again until the wake. And so it seemed to me during that conversation that I started to get an inkling of how I wanted to die. And I threw my hand up and I said, okay, so here's why I want to die. I want to die conscious and awake as best as I can, with my family around me, with their hands on my body, because I want to be able to meet that moment consciously. I don't want to be medicated. I don't want to be asleep. I want to be able to not have the last moment of my life be terror, right? And so I called my wife after we got done, and I said, I now know how I want to die. And she's like, what? And I was telling her about it, and she said, yeah, but how do you want to live? And I said, oh, cool. Yeah, I want to be conscious and awake as I live. So it served both ends of that. And there was something that healed in me in that conversation that I can't really put my finger on it, but being able to talk about it, being able to express, my tears and my fears, did something profound to me. And when I got home and up until now, there's been a different me that's been waking up. And it's not like I've got a sense of purpose or any of that other crap. I'm not going to blow smoke up your skirt, because there's a lot of crap going on right now. And let's be real, the world is built to put us to sleep. The world is built for comfort. They want us to go to sleep. And when they say they, it's the big they. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do recognize
It's
that
the man,
yeah,
dude.
it takes a lot to be conscious and awake in every single moment. And I
Yeah.
fail at that all the time. Going in unconscious
Yeah.
behavior, ways of being, triggers that I had from other relationships, shit my mother said, or now showing up in my relationship with Jennifer, when in fact that's not true at all. But
Yeah.
it's this what I came away with was a freedom, um, as I declared how I was going to die. I also recognized that there are people in my family who don't even want to talk about that. My daughter thinks that I'm going to live forever. We're not talking about that, Dad. And so, what would it be like for her to actually know that there's the only thing she needs to do is just show up and grieve? There's no responsibility on anybody, because I've already mapped it all out and I've owned my death plan. But by the same token, I got to own my life plan and continue to show up in the same way. So it was amazing. Um, I got to say goodbye to my dad, and yet I know that he's always with me. And so I understand that for thousands of years there's been a process for becoming a man or becoming an adult that worked, and for one reason or another, that has now gone away. And I think collectively, we as a society are, it's like a collective amnesia that something worked and now we're going to throw that out for something else, when in fact indigenous tribes um, have always known how to handle these particular moments. That's why they have shaman are specifically trained to help people deal with grief and passing. So it's interesting for me now that if we don't create space for mourning and a space for not the exorcism of guilt, but the transformation of guilt, shame, regret, sorrow, you know, how, well, the only things left is how else we show up in the world. Well, we show up as the hard ass, who never feels anything and can't share what's not there. You can be a flyboy who is so spiritual that nothing on this earth will touch him, yet he's not grounded enough to actually be present to what's actually going on. There's folks who show up as the hero warrior, like, yeah, I'm going to do battle with this. Well, we also have to understand that the hero is the last vestige of the immature masculine. The the hero has to die so the warrior can actually take his place. This idea that there's a certain template that we're born with, kind of like a roadmap of how we, not only how as we become men, but how we actually become men in community and space. And whether or not you actually jive with that, or you might, whether it's a secular thing or a religious thing, you got to admit that what we're doing now is not working. Would you say?
Yeah, because we're not doing anything about it, right?
Yeah.
And thank you for speaking to the hero's journey too, Adam. I want to speak to a few things you said. Honoring the space for your father and all of our fathers, and grief as a rite of passage. And Adam's going to talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But we have saying the word death, right, can evoke something. And another interesting thing, you're talking about this, the way we use words too with it, and like, sorry for your passing. And he mentioned when someone says sorry for your loss too, and he said, we didn't lose the people, they died. It's not like we can't find them. We know exactly where they are. They're either in the ground or wherever you believe their spirit went to, but we didn't lose them. It's interesting that we say loss, right? So we said, so what do you say to people? You could say, like, I hear that you're grieving, and I love you, I'm here for you. We don't have to fix them, and that grief is so important and necessary and our birthright. And there's actually a study that has come out, and I'm trying to recall the name right now. It's Dr. Gordon, and the next name will come to me. But it was done over 30 years ago, and it's been brought back into light, researched, restudied, reproven that tears, unprocessed tears, are actually toxic. So they took human tears and they placed unprocessed tears in rats, and it killed them. So unprocessed tears, they were proving, is actually has a toxic to it. And it's important. There's a reason we cry. We need to cry. We need to release these things. So if we're not actually crying or making space for our tears or accessing that, then we're actually killing ourselves. And how interesting that we've taught our society, or how unfortunate that, men don't cry, or there's not space for that, or there's not time for that. When if we had more space, consider if we had more space for crying, for grieving, for being however you are today, that we could actually move mountains in our society rather than pushing these things down. Because like Pop-A-Mole, that game, I assume most of you here are old enough to know if you're here, but the game, yeah, in the 80s, like you hit down
Whack-A-mole.
one mole and then another one comes up and you're trying to hit all these down, but there's always going to be, when you pop one down, another one comes up over here. And so that's what pushing this stuff down is. Trying to push your grief down is like, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not grieving. I'm fine. And you're just trying to keep all this stuff down. But when you actually let it come out, then it can move. Yes, a Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Beat.
If I could just pivot, I want to speak to Zach for a second, and because there's more than a few of you have been taking care of loved ones and being their death doula, right? Untrained, totally get it, and that is an amazing gift. But I'm also recognizing, Zach, for you, the toll that it took. And if there's, if you need distance from immediate family because you don't relate to them very well, I hear you. And that's precisely why Ben and I created these deep dives that we do every season based around a particular emotion of the season: spring, summer, fall, winter. There has got to be a time when we make room for this. And sometimes it's getting out of our own way, getting out of our life, even if it's for a weekend, to be with a community that accepts us, understands us, is willing to listen to us, and willing to love us for who we are, regardless of any of that other crap that we've taken on. It's a powerful gift. And I hope to see you there. And yeah, it's just so hard when you're doing it by yourself. We are not made to do this by ourselves. We're actually made to be in community and relationship. Because I don't care what you do for a living, really what you're doing is you're in relationship. You're building relationships no matter what business you're in. And a lot of us, myself included, forget that because we're so down with the nitpicky crap that we got to get done in a particular day. So yeah, survival mode. You were not made to survive this life. You were made to thrive in this life. And part of that is, again, ritualizing pain, grief, sorrow in such a way that you can actually be present to it. Let it overwhelm you, because man, when you let it in, there is, might feel like you're going to die, but you won't, especially in the environment with the Dude Nation, because we know what this is like. And we know that there's no way, you're the only one who can cure you, right? And you've got everything you need. But sometimes it helps to do it in a community. And I don't think I need to say anything more than that, other than, yeah, just feel your pain, man. Feel your pain. And I can connect to it so fast. And yet, wishing that I could do something about it from here does neither you nor I any good, right? And I just want to say thank you for being vulnerable enough to actually say that, so that others can also recognize that it's in them too, right? Because as soon as you're transparent and vulnerable, then someone says, oh, yeah, man, I got that too. I got that. What am I supposed to do about it?
Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you for saying that too, Adam. And maybe we can post some of Zach's comments as they come up to give our listeners some context here. And the other thing is, if you have any questions for us along the way and you're listening live, you can post that in right now. Any question around grief that you have, we're happy to answer. Adam, you talked about the hero's journey, and I want to speak to that and bring us back to that for a moment. Before we really go into the solution, which we're going to do. We're going to be setting you up. We're going to give you an opportunity to register for the next Dude Deep Dive. to really get involved and do nation. So you're right on the right track. For those of you who are here listening live, thank you for being here, for making space in your life on behalf of everyone in your life for this conversation. It's amazing to me how many wives and partners, other husbands of husbands, reach out to us and say, thank you. And, we're, for the men who actually show up here, thank you. Acknowledging you for that. Inside of the hero's journey, one of the most beautiful things we do in Dude School, our 12-week program for men, is that we get to talk about what men are allowed to be and not allowed to be. And most of the feedback we hear, because we ask newly every season, like, what are men feeling out there? And still to this day, so many men experience, including myself, like not full permission to be emotional everywhere in public. There's so many men who don't feel like they can actually have a real conversation with their friends about what they're really dealing with, or that they're not okay, or that they don't even feel comfortable being angry. And so all of this is being repressed. And by the way, the 5, as we're going to talk a little bit more about the hero's journey, but I think it's important to mention the 5 stages of grief, because they've been mentioned in the chat, all of them.
Please.
And the first one's denial. Lenny, you pointed to that, like, we don't want these things to happen. And it's really hard to process that these things have even happened to us. Even still today, after losing, I want to call my dad all the time, be like, oh, right, he died. There's that all the time. Or anger. That is such an important emotion. And it usually is a symptom letting us know that something else is going on underneath, but it needs to be processed and expressed, not just hidden, right? The people in the world aren't telling men to stop being angry. They're just saying, stop acting out in violent ways. Because we're not processing our anger. I actually have a rage box. I have a rage room. I have a car where I can go yell if I needed to, which is important because it's not hurting anyone and it's allowing it out, which allows me to process it or even breathe through it, or, whatever processes you have. Also bargaining, Lenny and Adam, you mentioned, I know, and my father passed, my sister mentioned too, like always trying to work out what we could have done differently, how we could have prevented this. Still ruminating, like, why am I ruminating? Consider that maybe you're just in a stage of grief, and you're not always control of the first thought, but you don't have to pick up the second one. So if you start to know yourself as someone who ruminates, like notice when you're picking it up, then you can actually maybe choose a different thought. And 4th is depression, that stage of depression, which I still find myself in and out of from grief. And 5 is acceptance. And that can be a lifetime process. So I want to encourage us to be where we are. And notice, if you're listening right now, like, what stage of grief are you at in your life? Just like, how are you really? What are those 5 stages for you? And are you on that hero's journey of trying to take care of everyone else? How do we actually start to take care of ourselves? Adam, where do you notice the hero's journey show up in your life? And what have you found to start be the solution out of that?
Before I get to that, I just want to speak to Jason's comment about fear gets in the way for me to share my emotions, because that really lands with me. There was a time in my life where I could actually incite myself into rage. It was like I was dipping my toe into the lake of collective men's subconscious, and the anger that was present there would freak me out because I thought I was going to like hurt somebody. Now, I would never hurt somebody. Typically, I was always wanting to hurt myself. But
Adam, I just want to say, me too. Like, I've had that kind of anger too. So thank you for sharing that.
So the fear was like, how can I actually express this in a way that someone else can hear? And it's also good for me to get it out of my body. And we're going to talk about somatic experiences a little bit as a way of like really, well, it's such a good process. And yet I know that if I deny myself that expression of anger, we won't call it rage, but if I deny myself any outward demonstration of that anger because I'm afraid of how someone else is going to take it, then all I'm doing is I'm just stoking the fire even worse, because I might think I'm okay in the moment, but maybe later on at work I dump on somebody or whatever, like coming out sideways out of my neck to shit all over the person next to me, and they didn't deserve it either. So as Ben, you were talking about, like, it's so important to be able to take just a step back and just to notice the emotion and notice the thought and just like be with it. Like, commit to sitting in the fire till the fire burns everything off that's not love. Right? Which means you might have to do that by yourself until you can get to the point where you can say, honey, can we have a conversation? Because there was something that you said earlier that I got really triggered by. Now, I know it's not you, okay? But the trigger is my responsibility. And if I could talk to you about that, it might help me be able to not get triggered again. But you got to do that from a place of neutrality, because they'll recognize the energy before the words come out. And really the energy, especially if you're a big guy like me, coming into a room, it's scary for some folks. So I need to know that I can take my time with it. And my wife and I have been in conversations when I've gotten angry, and what I've turned to her and said, honey, I hear what you're saying. I know you want this to come into harmony right now, but it's not going to do that. And I need to sit with this for a while. Are you okay if I come back to you tomorrow and we can finish the discussion? Again, I'm taking responsibility for my emotions, my reactions. I'm letting her know that she's not wrong because it's my shit, not hers. But by the same token, how else are we going to create a space of safety so that we can actually talk about this kind of stuff? We can't talk about it at the top of our lungs because, again, people shut down. Anytime you're speaking to somebody and you really want them to understand, then you need to speak to them in a language that they get. And the language of anger, unfortunately, most people don't get. That's why Ben and I are considering getting a body bag, the boxing, and hang it from a tree and leave a baseball bat there. Because last deep dive, there were some guys that were really processing some heavy shit. One guy had his entire life blow up a month before, basically homeless, with his wife and kids, 3 minutes away. Wouldn't let him back in the house. And this shit happens. Yet, how are we left to deal with it? Well, I guess as a community, we better come together and provide a safe container for that rage or that anger, or, you want to sit down and just cry, man. Ask for what you want. You want somebody to hold you while you do that? Cool. I'll get down on the ground and hold you. You want somebody to hold the bag while you punch it so you can scream at the top of your lungs? Do it. We actually grabbed a hold of this person, had this huge hug going on, and he would not scream. Didn't know how to like let that shit out. And so I started growling at the bottom of my voice. And within about a minute, we're all howling at the moon. And there was something about that energy just going right through the body up to the moon that helped. Now, that's not fixing it always, but in that moment, I don't know of any other cathartic way in order to get to a place of like, okay, now I can talk about it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
100%. I'm so glad you're bringing this up too. And when else would you get an opportunity to do that with men? And we get every single season, at least once a season, if not just for Adam and I, we have a space, a container now to release that, to actually stand on top of a mountain and scream and rage, to press up against each other's bodies safely and like feel that muscle and that tension, and then also hold each other. And all of it is appropriate. And if we can't access it, it's probably because we don't have a practice. Adam, there was a question in the field, and I think this comes up for a lot of guys right now. They're like, I don't have time to process my feelings. I can be angry, I can be sad, but even another, Lenny had said here, like, I'm passing on depression. I've done that before. I don't want to do that again. It's not always up to us, right? There's 5 stages of grief. So right. I think it's important to move through them, not just bypass them. But, to Lenny's point, how do we not wallow? And what if we don't have time to process our feelings?
Right. I mean, I guess,
you've been a chef. You got to like work 80 hours a week. Like, how do you?
You know,
stop and process your feelings.
so if I could just, I'm gonna use the metaphor of writing a book, if that's okay, just for a second.
Yeah.
Um, I've had probably 5 or 6 books that I've written almost to completion and never finished. And so I was determined to finish this book. And the only way that I could actually finish the book was to get up at 4:30 every morning. And my intention was, I'm going to write 600 words a day. That's it. And some days I wrote 1,000, some days I wrote 4. But the point was, is that I got up and made an appointment with myself and held myself to that. It wasn't a promise, but a clear intention. I had the book done in like 4 months. But the point is like, if you don't make time for it, you know, some things are so important that you will find time. You will do whatever it takes in that schedule to do this, because you know that if you continue to go on in this way, it's just going to drag it out. Lenny's talking about, being depressed after his dad died, and it just went on and on and on. Again, because there was no process to the 5 steps.
Yeah.
And the quicker you move through them doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, I'm done, I'm over, right? We have to understand that now this is a part of us. That sorrow that your dad's not around, never going to leave you. Never going to leave you. I
How
feel.
do you integrate it? Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to explore and talk about.
Yeah. So the things that we're going to talk about solutions and stuff, are probably present in your environment or where you live now. But because it's not, again, because we don't really talk about this stuff. Hey, where do you go to process your rage? Well, some of us already know that. We're in the gym every morning, beating the shit out of ourselves because it feels good. And that's why I want to talk about the somatic experiences, because they're so tremendous. Some people can actually process fairly well with talk therapy. And there's a certain understanding that you can get with talk therapy. But in my experience as a man, some of those energies are locked up in my body. And there is no way to get that shit out unless I do something with a certain amount of physicality to purge them from me. Now, again, we want to do this in a healthy, transformative way. Dude Nation is all about the community of men who are determined to reclaim their healthy masculinity, because there may be a time in our life where we went a little sideways, or we believed what people were telling us, even though we knew in our heart of hearts that, man, it's got to be a better way than this shit, because I am ending up angry and bitter and broken up. So yeah, if you said it perfectly, Ben, want to move your mind, move a muscle.
Yeah.
All I can say is that if you think it's important enough, you will find the time, because the longer you let this languish, again, there are people who are in your immediate circle, your sphere of influence, people who love you, who are waiting for you, not waiting for you to like, get it done, baby, come on. No, they want to let you have that experience as well, even though they might not necessarily know the language about it. But when you come back all clear-eyed and fresh and with a smile on your face, that's a whole different experience for them. And if it takes a sound purge, Zach, get up on the roof. I would go out every morning in the dark just to do an Indian wheel in my backyard, because I wanted to wake up and feel the east west, like whatever you need to do it. And I think that if we just sat and listened to our hearts would already tell us what we need, right? It's just like you say, oh man, I'm busy, I can't do that, like I got shit to do. Yeah, we all got shit to do, and yet all of us can probably find the time, say a weekend, to get together with a bunch of people. There are probably men's circles exactly where you are, Zach, Lenny, Jason. There's probably a men's circle in your neighborhood that you can go to and be in a circle of men whose only commitment is to hear you with ears of love. Because again, they recognize that all of us share these same emotions, these same struggles. And very often in the circle, you'll hear person after person after person. And by the time they get to you, you feel completely sourced, because they talk like everybody sharing the same shit. It's all the same. Like there's pain, there's pain, there's pain. It comes to me like, now I'm not alone. Now, do we have a preference for Dude Nation? Absolutely. However, if you're in pain, you need to find a community to be with right now, tomorrow morning. Go to meetup.com. In your area, go to Google men's work or men's circle or whatever, just to be seen fully for who you are without the baggage of trying to pretend that it's okay. That's the gift.
I love that. Thank you, Adam, for bringing us full circle and to the gift. You said a lot of incredible, powerful stuff there. So I want to make sure that, if you know that you're listening to this, you want more of it, we've got it recorded. So there is going to be more. You can go back and listen to the comments. And if you want to get in a dude circle right now, go to dude.school. We've got dude circles waiting for you. So they start every season and they're happening right now. And we're happy to drop you into a circle of men that works for you, and to see if it's a right fit for you. And one thing we can count on is that we're inclusive and we're going to hold you accountable to be your best self. And that's part of the work we do. And that this happens also in person. So Adam spoke to that. If there's not a group of men meeting, or ones that you don't feel safe with, you can create your own. And that's also some of the work we do in Dude School and Dude Nation, is that we're actually creating leadership programs to allow you to lead. You can come to the Dude Deep Dive, come to our retreat and be of service there. Find a way to jump in, find a way to lead a circle, talk to us, ask us. And then it can start there. Like, how do I start? And just like Adam said, going through 5 stages of grief, there's it reminded me of the 12-step programs. And the first time I went through the 12 steps, and then like, what's next? And the sponsor's like, well, now you're going to go through the steps again. Like, you don't graduate. It's just an opportunity to continue working and growing. And so this isn't like a means to an end. This is about becoming the best version of you that you can be, and having the most tools and support, because so many of you out there on that hero's journey probably still doing it alone. And if you don't know how to make space for it in your life, maybe you're trying to figure that out alone. So while a trusted friend and partner is a very important thing, it's a power greater than yourself that you can count on to listen to someone who's not your thoughts. But even those people have a vested interest in you and are listening on your behalf with a specific perspective and invested interest in you, and maybe you being some version of what they want too. So the other thing of having a men's group that becomes trusted listeners that aren't just a best friend or a partner or a family member is that you get objective, real truth perspective. And that's what we provide. And you get accountability for that. And so if you're not allowing yourself to be seen regularly by a friend, ask yourself, how could you be held a little bit more accountable? And we're ready to hold you if you're ready to jump.
Can I just jump in 1 second, Ben? Because
speaking of jump, Adam.
I live in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a little bit hippie, right? It's a little blue dot in a sea of red. And there are probably 5 or 6 different men's circles, one of which I started and continue to support, although I don't facilitate. And each circle is vastly different. There's traditions, there's trainings that have gone into this. So some people hold a very rigorous container and some hold a little bit softer container. But I don't get what I need completely with any other group other than Dude Nation. I mean, here with you and the men that show up is the work that I was born for, and I can feel it every time we get together in the circle, man. It is powerful shit. And our trusted friend, our friends and our partners, as Ben said so eloquently, they're emotionally connected to us. So they have an agenda. And sometimes they're actually listening for what it means about them, right? Honey, I'm getting a new job. It's halfway around the country. Well, what does that mean about me? Listen, it's a valid question, and yet it's not germane to actual conversation. So don't be surprised if friends and family are like looking at you while you're trying to explain to them the pain that you're feeling, and they're not quite sure what to do with it, because it might mean that they have to do some work, right? If you're doing work on yourself, no, I'm going to be about me. I am going to bring back every single part of me so I can be whole. Now all of a sudden you're different than you were yesterday, and they have to change up their entire way of being. And some people are up for that challenge and some people aren't. My wife, Jennifer, teaches transformational workshops all the time. And ever since my surgery in April, she's like, yeah, you're not the same person, which makes me a little freaked out. So a spell, she's been sleeping upstairs, I've been sleeping downstairs, because she wants to be responsible for her own vibration, for her own emotions, and not put it on me as if it was that I caused it, right? Because all I'm causing is for me to show up as a better man than I was yesterday. That's my only drive. So don't be surprised if some folks do in your intimate circle do not understand, and they want to make it up about them. It's just the way it is, and that's fine. It's fine, but you don't have to take that as the be all and end all. And the worst thing to do, and we've a lot of you guys have said it in the chat, like, it sucks not to be yourself fully with your family and friends. It sucks not to bring all of you to that particular moment, because some people are just not. Anger is such a trigger for most of the feminine world, because they hold on to a lot of the shit that's been done to them. And we as men, although weren't the perpetrators, we also have to hold each other responsible. Like, dude, that is not fucking cool. And so that's kind of the commitment in being held to the principles that are important to us, to understand that healing can happen almost instantaneously with the right ear. But don't think that just because it didn't happen there, that it can't happen somewhere else. Just keep following your thread, your heart's calling to, like, become whole again, because that, then you come and show up in a different way. And again, I tell all my clients, okay, you're going to go on this coaching journey. Great. Make sure you tell people, because as you start showing up differently, they're going to be freaking out. And that's completely natural, because who you were does not exist anymore, except as a memory. And you're going to be showing up, probably your head, shoulders a little bit more back, your head up, not having to say much, because you're completely grounded in who you are. There's some magnificence in seeing a man who is so solid. He's all three. He's the king, warrior, magician, and lover, equally blended. He doesn't have to protest. He doesn't have to push. He doesn't have to do nothing. He doesn't have to rail against, prove himself, explain him. He doesn't have to do any of that. And it has nothing to do with the outside perspective, outside world. It's who he is, who he has become. And some people will be like, oh, whatever that is, I want to give me some. And some people will be like, oh, can't you just go back to the way you were?
Yeah, as you're talking about your partner, Adam, too, and I see some other people sharing about this. Lenny even said something that I want to speak to. Like, nothing is better release than crying on the shoulder of a woman while she holds you and you hold her in love. And all the better if you're in love. And I actually want to challenge that, Lenny, because there's many opportunities when your partner is not going to be available to hold you. Whether they don't want to be, or they're not fully emotionally, or it's not appropriate. And what if your partner isn't a woman? And what if you there's no one around, right? So this is about learning to love yourself even outside of that. And Lenny, I want to challenge you to say, like, have you ever been really held by a man, just allowed to be really held and supported and cry? Like, fully unconditionally sob and let go and be a weeping mess. And if you haven't experienced that, then that's even some of the power of men's work, just to be witnessed by other men. Because if being safe with a woman is there, then what are the places, the shadows, right? If you're where you maybe don't feel safe. And that's what we're out to provide, is training our nervous systems. Like, maybe society hasn't trained you to feel safe to express yourself other places, but it's about learning to trust, to have that same safety and comfort with another man. And all of this is sex aside, all of this is gender aside. But the reason we mention men and we focus on men is because our programming is binary. Like, we're not just, the world isn't black and white, but we really, as if you are a man-shaped person in this world, there's programming you've received and you've taken on and consider doesn't serve you anymore. So this is about making space for that and having trusted partners outside of your own relationship and building a somatic body for it. Yeah, Adam, did you want to say something?
And just really quickly, it's my belief, and it's just my own, that a man's heart cannot be healed by a woman. or the feminine. A man's heart can only be healed in presence of another man, because we've all been conditioned to treat each other as enemies. And how many times my dad told me, don't show all your cards, keep that shit hidden. So I spent a great deal of my time thinking that I couldn't trust anybody because they were going to come take my woman and take my cave. Now, that may be true for some, but not true for all. So there's this huge gulf between us that if we take it at face value, it's like, how can I trust him? Like, could you actually let in intimacy from another man, not necessarily physically, I'm just saying, being held or whatever? Like, how many times in your life does that actually happen? And like, I've seen it happen in a circle and been so moved I couldn't even explain myself to someone else. Like, the level of intimacy, connection, love from another man, and all the anger, all the threats, all the fear, all that shit just dissipated, just blew up in a second. So while it's really great to cry on the shoulder of your woman, man, and be held, absolutely. But to the essential schism of the heart, this essential healing that gets to be done, it's my belief that it can only be done with other men. And I'm open to be proven wrong, but time and time again, I see men walking away from a circle fundamentally changed. And I know that couldn't have happened with their loved ones, because their loved ones, again, have an expectation of how they show up in the world. So,
and yeah, so one of the things I want to speak to about that, Adam, and is we're going to keep moving here, but that's part of we overthink this as men too. So if any of you have any resistance, know that that's normal, and that you being present, whether it's in a circle online with Dude School, it's in person with us at the Dude Deep Dive, that you being there is going to be enough. You don't have to do or be anything else. In fact, you are needed. Each one of us is like a snowflake. We have a programming, we have a frequency unique unto ourselves, unto you, that only you have, and only your voice can heal. And when you share your voice in a space, in a circle, right? Like, that's why we talk about more than one person, is that since the dawn of time, we humans have been sitting in circle. Even animals sit in circle for safety. You never see a horse lying down unless it's around other horses in a circle. It's being held by the group. The herd is listening for the group. And when you share your voice in a circle, it resonates. So consider you have such a beautiful medicine on your heart. And if you haven't shared it with a circle of men, come join us. I want to talk about, some of the tools for really getting into for grief. And one is building, we've talked about being in a circle, being in a group, building a somatic body for it. So maybe you've heard that spoken. That soma piece is just the body-mind connection. Somatic. So somatic is kind of a hot word right now, but the reason it's hot is because we're actually getting out of our heads and back into our bodies. You may have heard of the three brains: the head, the heart, and the gut. We train this brain a lot in Western society, a lot. The way porn is available in today's society, we train our fourth brain too, a lot. Like, we really nurture that sex. But it's all these quick dopamine hits. It's trying to get things right. It's trying to expel energy or feel better, right? But one of the most powerful brains that is left untouched is our heart. Our heart has electromagnetic field 10,000 times greater than our brain, and yet we don't tune to the brilliance, the intelligence that your heart actually has. Yes, your heart has its own intelligence. Even your gut biome controls a lot of what your head thinks. And we don't think of or nurture our guts that much. In fact, we're only starting to think about what we eat in our society, right? And that is so much connected to all of these things. And it's all in the body. They say you are what you eat. And if we're 90 or 80% or whatever you believe, 60 or more % water, liquid, and you watch how much a tide moves on a beach just within 12 to 24 hours, how much are we moved by a moon cycle? How often are women allowed to celebrate moon cycles and cycles in life? And we men are not talking about our own cycles. We're not dealing with what's really going on in the planets and the moon that we're all experiencing together. So you can actually build a body for just by creating awareness, by meditating, by moving. We mentioned like move your mind, move a muscle. Exercise, fight or flight is real. And actually, if you allow yourself to run when you're experiencing that, like go for a run or just sit or just breathe, that those any of those things is doing something. If you shift how, if you're depressed and you start to go for a walk or run, that used to be every time I had an anxiety attack in my 20s. That's what I did when I was heavily drinking. I'd wake up panicked. I'd go for a run and I'd come back feeling so much better because you literally are moving it. You move in your body. Yoga works because it's a way we feel safe to move, and eventually things come out of our body. And but we also need to process it with sound. So moving these things somatically, building a body, meaning that could be at the gym, but also having space to share your anger, a rage room, a rage box. There's actually now places you can go like axe throwing businesses. There's rage rooms in certain cities now. I have clients build their own in their basements, like either breakable things that won't hurt you or non-breakable things. And even my mom, I remember in 1980, she had I came downstairs, my mom was beating the couch in her basement with a baseball bat. And I, as a child, was terrified. And then she told me what was going on. And like, I haven't forgotten it 40 years later. I still think about it. And I was like, wow, she actually was handling her anger so responsibly. She was angry that her father committed suicide and left her early. And she was the eldest and his best friend. So, of course, she was angry, and actually got to watch, in hindsight, one of my parents deal with anger really well because she wasn't hurting anyone. And that brings up like health professionals. If you need extra help, that it is available and it's free, and we're happy to connect you even more with healthcare. And we're developing partnerships with organizations that provide free healthcare and resources for men. So don't let that stop you from getting help. You can call Alcoholics Anonymous, you can call 911, you can call 311, and I believe it's 611 too, the suicide hotline. And all these people connect you to services that are free.
They've all gotten one. So now it's all one. It's 988.
988. Thank you.
988. And to your point, sometimes there's a wire broken. Okay. And some people do really, really well with medication. Sometimes not. But
I'm one of them, by the way, that has done well with, and sometimes not. So actually, different parts of my life, I had to come on and off certain medications that saved my life or almost took my life. I mean, the wrong medication, right?
Yeah, we all have to be willing to play with it all, hold it all loosely. If there's something that's presenting that may work, cool. A lot of us also have a lot of pride, and have been conditioned to figure it out by ourselves. And the fact of the matter is, it's a lot more fluid and it works much more quickly if you engage someone else in help. And I just wanted to make this point about the somatic exercises. There's an exercise. There's one group in here in Nashville that we do a lot of somatic exercises. So it could be kind of just grabbing each other, by the arm, and just kind of grounding your feet. And you just want to kind of push against one another, just to feel the pressure against one another. And I recognized, having been a wrestler in high school, how much I missed that, like the physical sensation of being kind of tangled up with another man in a safe space. You're not trying to take each other down. Or the other way was to stand across from one another, grab each other's wrists, and then squat down. And you have to use the energy of the other person squatting down to hold you. So there's the juxtaposition of like trying to push against someone else, and then another, and then holding. And there's something that happens in that body, man. It starts to break up all those crystallized energy in your body and starts moving it out. And I know that we're going to be incorporating a lot more somatic experiences as a way to condition the body that also conditions the mind. So thank you.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, we're going to be getting in some deep somatic work in the next deep dive upcoming. And even in Dude School, we integrate that in the work. But we're really here to talk about grief, and grief as a rite of passage and the access to that. Plant medicine is another one of those that we support, and also is not right for everyone. So there's a couple things I want to mention. One, you can look up a series on Spotify with Metsa Nihu. He's an incredible medicine man, from the Lakota tradition, from Peru, from Colombia, from Mexico. He studied with shamans and was gifted, sorry, he was granted and sanctioned in order to carry plant medicine to our country and to be a priest of it. And he teaches an incredible series about mindfulness around plant medicine, both as a practitioner or as a participant. And so if you are interested in practicing it, I would highly encourage you to both research the practitioners that you may work with and their intention, safe spaces, also talk to other people who have experienced it, know that everyone has a different experience, and also check out the science of your body. So it's actually not appropriate to take it with SSRIs.
Correct.
Some of that can cause some serious toxicity. So knowing the people, is there an intake form with who you practice with? Is there an integration process? And Adam and I both have experience both with plant medicine, both with sobriety, both with intoxication, and both with integration. And we can really offer a lot of support in that space of integration. And that's what men's groups have made available for me too, including the indigenous people and the wisdom of Metsa. And in our next Dude Con, our annual men's conference, we're even going to be having some of those people speaking on this very thing. So it's about bringing intention and ancient wisdom to everything you do. And yes, is the wisdom being sourced in tradition, in rites of passage? Adam, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about ritual and your experience with that. One of the reasons I'm attracted to Adam, amongst many things, is his experience when we first met, really podcasting, his experience with rites of passage and with young men, and how grief is actually not only a birthright, but a rite of passage.
Yeah, thank you for that. Whatever approach you decide to take for processing your grief, know that, we salute you. We cheer you on, whichever way you want to go. We have a few caveats and some things that we think is important to look out for. Ben mentioned about integration of plant medicine. Very often folks are going out into the jungle and having an experience, and then they come home and they're back at home, and there's no context for that. Their heart was wide open, and then they come back and feel everything. And sometimes that feels like shit because we're so used to straining most of that crap out and keeping it at arm's distance. Whatever you do, it's important to ritualize it. So indigenous cultures create a ritual around a particular event, and then they go through that, whether it's with music, but there's, folks who are going to place hold like shamans and things of that sort, but they create a ritual around it. I created a ritual around breakup of my marriage that I'll tell you about in a second. But there's one, as I was listening to Ben talk, I was reminded there's a shaman here in Asheville who was taught by an African shaman, and he told him that there was a ceremony that pregnant women have to go through. So when a woman gets to a certain stage of pregnancy, she's brought into the center of the village. There's a fire, there's dancing, and the shaman gets down on his hands and knees and talks to the baby in utero. So he's not talking to the mom, he's talking to the baby. And he's got two questions for the baby. He says, number one, what is your name? And number two, what medicine do you bring that is being called for? So that when the baby is born, they can remind him. And I am absolutely certain that everybody who's listening to this, who's watching it, who's come either live or on a recording, each of you have medicine that is being called for, or else you wouldn't be here. This is a time of great change. And we need to be aware that as long as we are keeping it to ourselves, then you are selling someone else short. Someone is in need of your medicine, Zach. Jason, someone is looking to hear your voice, looking for you as an example and want to hear your voice. We got to do this together because each of us, our medicine is needed, and it's different for each one of us. So one of the reasons that we're here, like process this stuff out, like go through them, like understand that there's a process to do it. Here's what it looks like. And let's do the work so that we can get on being who we're supposed to be here. Like we came for a very specific mission. And as long as it was in our heads or talking about, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning about guilt about what we could have done or should have done, that's great. But now again, as I said before, now we're not being present to what actually is in our lives. So I think it would be a great, I would love to have that ritual now, because I'd love to have somebody show up in my life and go, okay, your name is such and such and such, and this is your medicine. You're supposed to sing at the top of your lungs or whatever that is. But I don't like, this has happened throughout history, throughout cultures. It's the same through line that we're here to be with one another. We're here to help serve one another. And just hold on a second. Yeah. And so I would say, so small ritual. All right. Not a big deal. It's just, so I gathered up all the letters and all the pictures that I had exchanged with my ex-wife. And I went down to the creek and back of the house and I built a little fire. And I might have had a little drink or two, but I wanted to create a ritual around this, because the fact of the matter is most shamans spend most of their time on an interior quest to shut off those areas in which they're leaking energy. And that energy is typically where we stay connected to others, right? Even after the relationship gone, you can still feel them in your gut, right? I sat down and I wanted to cut the cord with my ex-wife. So I decided the only way I was going to do that is to create a little fire, have a little ceremony, throw everything in the fire, and just sit there and watch the fire consume it all. And I could not believe, well, it wasn't that much stuff, but that flame shot up like you wouldn't believe. There were sparks coming off the whole thing, because I realized that there was a shitload of energy pent up in those pictures and those letters, profound love, dedication, that all came to naught. That's okay. But at least I was going to sit there and I was going to let it go. It was powerful. And she called me the next day and said, what did you do? And you can create a ritual around any of it. It's just say what's in your heart. And before we go much further, I could talk about this stuff all night long, but we have an offer.
So welcome. So this is welcome to it. We talked about where you might be on the other side of this, and here's an opportunity to do something about it. So the offer we have right here is for our Dude Deep Dive. The Dude Deep Dive. Join us for a transformative 2-night, 3-day retreat in the Hudson Valley. We're going to explore this profound concept of grief as a rite of passage. We'll be doing soul healing, meditation, somatic work, fireside talks, nature immersion, laughter. Yes, we'll even have some fun and play and nourishing food as well. And this is your opportunity to really start your journey of self-discovery and healing, to start to give yourself this time. So if you don't have space for it, this is an opportunity to make space for it. You've made space for everything else in your life. You make space to go make that coffee. You make space to check out when your partner's sharing, right? You can make space 2 days for yourself. And this is that opportunity today.
Yeah.
So Adam, who's this for?
It's for any man who feels like there's something missing. Maybe you don't have the relationships you would like to have. Maybe you feel like, taking responsibility for your own emotive state. Maybe you know that there's a bigger life calling you. Maybe you feel that you want to step into your greatness. Ben and I talk a lot about owning your space. Someone gets up, they want to talk. No, you step into the circle so that you actually take your space, because so many of us have been kowtowed and beat down. So, it's like, well, you don't. No. You get to own your space. You get to inhabit that space. You get to feel what it's like to be whole and integrated. If there's a man out there who feels like he's lost a part of himself along the way, or been made to lose it along the way, however you want to language it, it's for you. If you just want to come hang out with a bunch of guys and have fun and see and feel their hearts in a way that you probably haven't done before, then this is space for you.
Mm.
And is there anybody else out there, Ben, who should go?
Yes, all of us. I'll be there. These are the things that you can really expect to take away from it. So the side effects may include a happy partner, you know, soul guiding sessions, meditation practices that you can take home with you. These talks that are going to open and heal your heart. We're on incredible sacred land in the Hudson Valley where we're meeting. It is sacred land, and we honor the First Nation people there. And it has a powerful vibration that we're going to share with you, including the fun, the relaxation, the nourishment, and the education. And we're going to also provide grief as a rite of passage. This is just an opportunity for profound healing and growth that you get to have just for you because you say so.
Yeah, we're gonna invite you to stretch your heart, to stretch your spirit, to stretch your body. Ben does this incredible morning yoga routine with all these crystal bowls. Oh my God, man, it's so awesome, really.
And what you can expect to leave with. We have shared this based on research, and we're going to share some testimonials based on feedback. This is what we're saying you'll leave with, but none of us can truly know what you'll leave with until you really show up with on the other side.
Well, let's
it's
listen.
About showing up.
Let's listen to one.
Hey, what's up, guys? I just attended the Dude Deep Dive, and what I was looking to get out of it was clarity and you know, a little bit of brotherhood, transformation, and I got a lot more. I got people that I now have lifelong relationships with, able to come, be vulnerable, do what I need to do on my end so that I can bring that to my life, to my family, my friends, and be the man that I've always wanted to be and more. So I just want to thank you guys for holding space for that this weekend. It's been truly a transformative experience, and I look forward to many more of these in the future. So thank you.
And what's the most surprising thing you got out of this weekend?
How little
What do you say the most surprising thing I got out of this weekend was?
The most surprising thing I got out of this weekend was how much everybody else is in the same exact boat as me, and knowing that there are people that I can come to and just have that connection with without any fear of being judged or criticized. So that's been a huge difference. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's anything you want for yourself in your life is available on the other side of a Dude Deep Dive. My wife and I are still growing from the last one, and so am I. Like, people are commenting on how I show up differently, and you know, we're just holding the space, but we're in it with you. And so if there's anything you've been resisting, even if it's your own healing or making time for yourself, or you know, being with a group of people or being with a group of guys, is on the other side of that resistance is your transformation. So you can count on that. Adam, we have one more testimonial here that we could
We do
share with these guys.
What's the most surprising thing you got out of this weekend?
Surprising thing that I got from this weekend was just the serenity here. Even though it was the first time that it was being held, it looked like it's been around for such a long time. The wisdom, the confidence, just how everything came together and meshed together was amazing. I thought the facilitators have been together for ages, and just sharing all of that knowledge with us, that's what was surprising. So I was like, whoa, this is really the first time? I don't think this is it.
What's one thing you got out of it?
Strength. I got a lot of confidence. I got a lot of acceptance, and just believing in yourself, to going forward, that you can carry this torch, and not to be judgmental about yourself, but to just share all that is trapped in here and in here. So that was important for me.
Beautiful, thank you.
I love how he talks about it being trapped inside. It's there. You just can't access it because it's trapped, right? And there's a few more, but I think you guys get the point, right? And I also admit that each one of those participants, they brought their medicine, right?
Yeah.
The circle was special. The deep dive was so cool because they were willing to show up and bring all of themselves. Good, bad, ugly, didn't mean shit. It was so awesome. They made it a transformative experience. We were there facilitating, but it was because of their commitment to their journey. And like, I paid my money, I'm gonna get every dime out of this. And that's the attitude we like. You're here to do the work, then let's get to it.
So there's an opportunity for you to register. You're not going to just get this and not just get, you're going to have this phenomenal experience. Plus, you're going to have 20% off registration in Dude School. So in our 12-week program to integrate this, you get 20% off of DudeCon, which is our upcoming North American conference for men and men's healing. You get membership into our free Dude Nation Slack channel. You get access to us as leaders, to our incredible community, all of our resources, and membership in our private Facebook group. So you get all the support you can handle, really. We'll give it to you and provide plus access to all of these. So that is one of the resources. Today, we normally this program, and in the next 24 hours, it is going to be $9.95. But today, right now, and for the next 24 hours, we're going to offer it to you for $895. So that's more than a 10% discount. We're going to take $100 off just for you for being here, for taking the time. For someone who's serious about their healing, this is the opportunity. So Adam, you want to talk us through this just a little bit more?
Sure. If you're on the fence and you want to talk to somebody just to make sure, maybe you have questions, maybe you have a bad back and camping's no good. There's probably lots of questions you have. If you know right now that this is something that you want to do, then I just put the link in the chat for the dudenation.com/DDD PayPal, which will take you to the PayPal checkout. If you want a little bit more information, which, sometimes our brains are saying that we need to collect more evidence about why we should do something, when in fact our hearts are actually a yes already. No, well, well, about that house, honey, was there a bathroom? Like, it's either a yes or a no, as far as I'm concerned. Collecting evidence, I honor that. And if you want to talk to Ben and get a little bit more information, you can certainly do that at dudenation.com/interest call. It'll take you right to a booking link, and you guys can schedule some time together. Or if you want to take softer approach, perhaps maybe you want to fill out an interest form again to get more information, then you can do that by going to dudenation.com/interest form. And we want to honor everybody on their journey where they're at. And it may take a little bit of talking. It might just kind of work out the bugs, like what's going on? Am I okay with this? Not okay with this? And again, we honor all that. We're just happy that you're here. So the question before was, how do you make time? Well, you made time tonight, right? You made time. Hey, way to go. You made time. You just proved it to yourself. You can make time for yourself. And you're worthy of your own time. You're worthy of your own love, your own self-respect, your own dignity, sovereignty, dominion over your heart and soul. You deserve all of that. And it's our honor to be able to facilitate that. And again, as long as you're committed to the work, we're there.
Dude. Yeah, so this is really the last thing I want to say is I want to acknowledge each and every one of you for whatever it took for you to be here, whether you're listening live or listening this in the future. You are live right now. When you're listening to this, your life is actually happening right now. And now. So this is the opportunity to change something. You can keep going as you always have, and we still have your back. Nothing may change, but if you actually want to have a change in your life, this is a way to do it. And if you don't have the money, send us an interest form. Let's talk about it. There are people in your life who would pay you to come here. I know that sounds like a wild concept, but what's available on the other side is that much value. And it was so powerful for us as facilitators that we realized this is needed in the world no matter what. So we have a ritual now. We meet once a week to organize it, and we hold it every single season. But none of us are, it's not guaranteed we're going to be alive tomorrow, that any of this will be around. You know, what's happening is right now. Our life is happening right now. So this is the time to invest in yourself right now. So whether it's taking an action to pay right now, or taking an action to book a call right now,
Correct.
or taking an action to fill out that form right now, whatever you do, don't leave here without taking a new action. And that's my challenge to each and every one of you.
That's so perfectly said, because I know in my own life that when I move energy on one thing, I move energy on everything. So taking action is very, very important. And for those of you who are like, yeah, man, things are a little strapped. Okay, fill out the interest form. Put a call in to Ben. If you have the desire, then we want to make sure that there's an avenue open to you. And to Zach, I'm glad you're here too, but don't skip your AA meeting, dude. We need support in all areas, but thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Dudes, you're getting well. Welcome to Dude Nation. Thank you for joining us, whatever it took for you to be here. Thank you, Adam, for being such a beautiful partner, dude, co-host in my life. I'm so grateful to get to lead this with you. And we'll see you all at the deep dive.
Thank you.